Let's go ahead and get started here. Out of respect for your time, a couple of minutes after 1 o'clock. So welcome all of you to the every other week teleconference, press conference. So fire away to whatever questions you may have for Ross today.
Hey, Ross, you feel any more optimistic or anything since it seems like we're at least hearing some good news nationally?
Yeah, I think, each day that goes by, we have, some certainty, we have some, clarity, which gives us, optimism that, we're reaching, maybe the peak of all of this, whether it's locally or regionally or as a country. And so, yeah, I think with each passing day and we get more good news and, testing becomes more available, that we can start to look at, what it might, operate, under in terms of how we, return to activity and play games and go to school and all those things. So definitely optimistic for sure. We've been so all along, knowing that we had a lot of time, but that's how we're looking at it at this stage.
How devastating is the oil news?
Well, it's hard to say exactly, right? Because that's obviously an ongoing, situation that those folks are dealing with. I don't know how you get the price of a commodity, below zero. I don't know enough about the economics of that to fully understand it, but obviously it has an impact. We get it. That's why we've been in constant, dialogue with our donors and season ticket holders, and we want to be as flexible with them as possible, whatever that impact might be. But that obviously has devastating news on our economy, and we need to understand that and, be ready to react, whatever that might be.
Ross, Major League Baseball has talked about possibly using Texas as a home base. Have you been in any contact about Bluebell Park possibly being used in that situation?
We have not been contacted by Major League Baseball.
Ross, could you tell me who's going to make the final decision on all the NCAA football teams? There's a lot of moving parts. Who will finally say, yeah, the season starts for everyone on September 5th or whenever it's going to start?
We talked about that, a couple weeks ago on this call, who is the ultimate authority. And I think depending on who you talk to, depending on what region you're in, it may vary. It may be, the county health official may have ultimate authority in your locale. It may be the governor. We obviously know what, the White House talked about, that the president wants to leave it up to the governors of each state. And then so we see Georgia move forward with some, reopening. We see what's happening here locally in our state with a transition to reopen certain things, and we'll have more news on that next week to see what that looks like. So it's going to vary. There's not one single source at this point in time that's going to say, okay, on this date, everyone returns, because it is, somewhat of a moving target, and that is the benefit of where we sit as of April 21st, is we still have time. It's way too early to make absolutes on anything at this point in time, and so we still have time, and so I think that's the benefit. But that's a question we talk about at the SEC level, at the university level, the local level, and right now there just isn't a single source that can really just say definitively this is how it happens and this is when it happens.
Hey, Ross.
Long answer to say we don't know yet.
Hey, Ross, where are y'all in your spring coaches kind of deciding what the rosters and what seniors will be coming back looks like? Where are y'all in that process?
We gave that information to our coaches a few weeks ago, and so they were having those on. They want to have those one-on-one conversations. Obviously, they have to do it in a virtual setting. So I don't know exactly if all of those have been completed yet, but we did give all of that authority to our coaches to have those conversations. And then as it relates to baseball, baseball's fluid because you've got the roster limitation. It's the only sport that has a roster limitation. You've also got the cap on only 27 student athletes can be on scholarship. So there has been a national conversation about maybe expanding, what that might look like for 1 year. And so we were kind of waiting on some of that information to crystallize. So it's still kind of a fluid, element for us right now. We do know that we gave that plan to our coaches. They started those conversations, but we don't have that final list quite ready yet.
Hey, Ross, to follow up on what you were saying about there's no one entity that's going to make the call for everybody, I believe you were saying early, I wanted to get clarification, you were saying early on that if Colorado doesn't start until 3 weeks after Texas, that y'all would want to schedule to reflect everyone being back. Are you now seeing where some schools may be able to play this fall and others not? Am I reaching the wrong conclusion?
No, we haven't seen that yet. Again, I think because of the time frame where we are right now, I think it's too early to make a definitive, declaration on that at this point in time. So we haven't seen that yet. Again, back to what the federal government put out last week about sort of that 3-phase, plan. I haven't done the analysis to kind of see where every state, sits right now. I know Texas, we're in better shape than maybe some other places based on our numbers. So that's a good trend. We need to keep that going. But we haven't got to a point where anybody needs to, kind of make that definitive line of, okay, this place is ready and this place isn't. I think we're still early in the process to make that declaration.
I know this.
Hey, Ross, there's been a lot of programs that have started to make athletic programs have started to make cuts, and even some that have cut some programs, some teams from their athletics. Is that even an option you guys are looking at, or how close is A&M to making those kind of decisions?
We're fortunate that our budget cycle is a little bit later than some others. Our budget for fiscal year 2020 ends on August 31st. So we have a little more time to plan versus most universities, every university I've ever been at, the fiscal year ends on June 30th. So we have a couple more months to really crystallize, some of our planning and our operations. We have not put that on the table. We don't anticipate, putting that on the table. Again, you're going to have a regardless budget. Regardless, we've talked about this on these calls. We're going to have to tighten our belt. We're going to have less revenue than what we had, last year. That's just given the economics of our environment right now. Then you sort of have a mid-tier budget that, maybe you're not playing games with fans in the stands, and that would cause, some dramatic, cuts and things like that. And then you have the worst case scenario. And really, it's way too early to map out what even that looks like. How do you even operate? I can't fathom how you would even operate under that scenario. So we haven't really gone down that far yet because, we have some time. We need more clarity. But we don't anticipate that we'd have to do anything with our sports or how many, opportunities that we offer. And we're fortunate from that perspective.
I should have asked
Go ahead.
I should ask a follow-up. Yeah, about if Big League Baseball did happen to reach out to y'all, is that something you would be interested in?
I think so. I think it goes back to, what does our local health officials, say we can do, what kind of, mechanics are involved and how that operates. But absolutely, I think if we can, get activity and it's safe and we can participate, I think that'd be a great way to kind of get back, things up and running. And so we definitely participate in that.
Hey, Ross, Greg Bailey from ABC in Houston. I apologize. I'm not a regular on the teleconference calls with you. You touched on something there. Yeah. How open are you to a college football season without fans when you are asked for your input at either the SEC or the NCAA level? And where would that leave college football in general financially?
My priorities at this point in time, obviously the health and safety, of our fans, our players, our workers, everybody, right? Our society. And then the second thing would be, we want to play 12 games. We want a full schedule of games. And if that means we need to delay a little bit, then we would. And then the third thing is we want full stadiums. I think that's the experience that our student athletes signed up for. That's what the fan expectation is. That's what our communities expect and really rely upon from an economic, standpoint. And so that's how we have prioritized, in terms of how we would look at the college football season. Would we play without fans? Of course. If that's what the players want to do and we could make it safe, we would operate that way, but that's not ideal. I don't think that's what the experience is all about for mainly our players, but also the communities that we live in. So that's how we prioritized it. What those numbers are and things like that, like I said, it's somewhat early to speculate on the full effect because we don't know. We don't know, could you have some people in your stadiums? Is it social distancing? Is it 6 feet apart, right? I mean, there's so many scenarios out there that people are contemplating that we just haven't done the math on that because we want more clarity and we do have some time to figure these things out.
Ross, some places their coaches have taken pay cuts. Have y'all talked about anything like that or deferments or anything like that yet?
We've looked at lots of, different models in terms of, some of the cost cutting or revenue and things like that. And that would be one of them, but we haven't approached anybody. We haven't looked at that specifically. It would be on the list of things, but I think you don't want to impact your people. I don't really care how much they make. I think it's the first thing you do is you want to protect your people. And that's what we would look to do. So, it would be on the list, but we haven't approached it. We haven't gone in depth on it. We haven't had that conversation at the university level, and I think that's where it has to start, at the university level, and it just hasn't come up at that level.
On that coaching salary front, I'm wondering if the season is affected from a revenue perspective. Moving forward, how do you expect college coaching salaries to be impacted in the future if y'all have to make significant belt tightening adjustments moving forward based on the revenue gain this season?
I believe it depends on how you operate. If you're not playing a full schedule, then maybe you look at some adjustments. So it all depends on how we're formatted, how we operate. Is it a full complement of games? Is it full stadiums? Those are the things that would be the first sort of determination of how we would look at that. So again, until we know that clarity, it'd be way too early to really speculate on that.
Ross, I know this is just speculation, so if you don't want to answer, fine. But I wonder if some places like, say, the Pac-12 felt like in their area they weren't comfortable playing. Do you think a college football season could proceed without one of the major conferences participating?
To me, at this point in time, all these different scenarios, you're looking at all of those. What happens if certain regions are ready and others aren't? We know what the leadership in California has stated about, public events, large gatherings. We know what the mayor of Los Angeles has talked about. So that would impact, obviously, USC and UCLA. I believe Alabama plays USC to open the season. And, if Alabama's ready and USC's not, what happens there? I think all those different scenarios you have to look at as we contemplate this rollout of return to activity. And I don't know what that means. There's contracts, there's force majeure language in those contracts, there's cancellation policies. Is it a forfeiture? We don't know all those things at this point in time, but all of those things are being processed and reviewed and looked at. And that's where you really hope that the conference commissioners, really come together at obviously the Power 5 level, but also the FBS level, and that there is, some uniformity on how we return to activity and how we return to play.
Hey, Ross, how is y'all's interaction with your guys that could get drafted here this next weekend different? Are y'all doing anything different or special for them with considering the circumstances?
Probably give that to Alan and Brad and Mike, from a PR standpoint. Obviously, we'll be promoting, a lot of things, just like we did the Maroon and White Day on Saturday. A lot of social media activity, We'll be promoting those guys, throughout the weekend, starting on Thursday. Hopefully, Justin gets picked in the first round. He's close, I think, to that. So we'll be doing a lot of hype and a lot of activity, and it's all built on promoting those guys, supporting those guys. I don't know the specific plans yet, but I know we'll do a lot because that's the world we live in, right? Coach Price took over Twitter and the internet with his barbecue challenge on Saturday, so we want to try to do as much of that as we can this weekend.
Ross, in terms of, we've been talking about scenarios and how it's too early right now to really speculate, that sort of thing. The president of South Carolina last week came out and said that he'd be making a decision on fall classes. He hoped to by May 15th, but was also saying that kind of the drop dead date was June 15th and making a decision on fall classes. Is that one of the key deadlines out there, is when schools make a decision on bringing students back for fall?
Definitely, and luckily we're part of that conversation here at the university. Is what does the fall look like? And those conversations are being had right now. They have not really, at least I have not been told an exact timeline of when a fall class decision will be made. I know it's being discussed, and there's different models and things like that. I think the key to all of that is what does normalcy look like in higher education. I've heard a lot of talk that there's no way that we can play games if students are not back on campus. Well, what does that even mean right now? What is a new normal higher education experience look like? I think until we know that answer, I think it's way too early to make a proclamation that we can't play sports without students. And so to me, if we make it safe and there's an operational method involved in your university, and your university is open, then to me the extracurricular activities, not just athletics, those are things that students want. That's why they came here, is for that social aspect, that extracurricular aspect. So to me, I think it's, again, way too early to make any sort of proclamations. But we don't even know what normalcy will look like in the higher ed world. There could be lots of modifications that benefit students, and student athletes would be a part of that as well.
Hey, Ross, it's a little unconventional this year, but this is your first time being around with Muster. So just your initial reactions on that, and the things that I guess that you've seen from it virtually anyway.
Yeah, I was scheduled to speak tonight in Williamson County at their muster ceremony, and I just recorded a short little video for them, and just to be able to call the roll. This morning I think I was on right around Lyle Lovett, so I guess if I could share some airtime with Lyle Lovett, I guess that's pretty cool, since he's a world famous singer and an Aggie, and so just the meaning of it, and how we honor the past and the history and everybody that came before us, I think is so special here at A&M. Just to be asked to do it is very humbling and appreciative of the opportunity. And I think I pronounced everyone's name correctly. They gave me a good guide, and it was just really a pleasure to honor those folks this morning.
Thanks. Ross, during the summertime, you guys traditionally do the coaches' nights around the state and that sort of thing. Texas is looking at reopening to some extent. Has there been any decision made as to whether you will be doing those or not?
I may let Mike Wright take that one. I know we've talked about virtual settings, but I don't think there's been a final decision. Mike, do you know anything?
No, the Association of Former Students is looking at obviously some options for that, up to and including maybe one coaches' night overall, but that even has just been in the discussion stage. And like our program is looking at a number of options, I think that's all up for discussion. Chuck, I know that Dallas runs one of the best of those coaches' nights, but right now all of them are on hold.
My guess is, Chuck, that we'll do something in a virtual setting at this point in time, would be my guess. And that's been the neat thing about this. We've had several sessions with Coach Fisher and donors and supporters, and just being out there. I mean, he's got time. We've all got time, and we've all enjoyed doing these type of things. So I'm sure we'll do something in the virtual setting.
How different is the virtual like things with donors than it is from like the standard in person shaking hands and talking over drinks or whatever you guys do when you...
Yeah, at this point, you can't really play golf over Zoom, right? Not that we play a lot of golf, but it's been what's been cool about it is they love the interaction. They just love some sort of FaceTime, interaction, just some dialogue. And so I think from that standpoint, it's been really neat to see how fired up people are about taking your call or taking a meeting or things like that. So it's different. Obviously, you're not sitting there having lunch or doing those things in a social setting, but at least you're able to make contact through all this technology. And they've appreciated it, and that's been neat to see.
When you kind of consider some of the
last couple weeks.
Uh-oh.
Go ahead.
Who's going?
Chris, I think you got the right of way here. Go ahead with your question.
I hit the buzzer. I appreciate it. When you kind of consider future plans from a big picture perspective, how do kind of smaller issues that are not really small, like contracts, bye weeks, and payouts factor into those discussions as y'all try to model stuff out?
You're talking about game contracts?
Game contracts, TV contracts, those situations with the non-conference schedule and everything that goes with it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to answer this the right way based on your question. I mean, again, when you're analyzing, if you're moving things around, if there's a adjustment to the schedule, you have to start with, the contractual, relationship and what does it say? Who wrote did we write the contract? Did the contract come from the other party? So you look at all those things. But I think right now the prioritization of what we deal with on a daily basis, you've got to be laser focused. So some of the smaller things, you can say, we're not gonna look at that right now. We're gonna set that aside because we have to worry about, return to activity and playing the seasons and things like that. So that's how we've kind of looked at some of those contractual things right now. If it's a game, then we have to look at it in depth. If it needs to be set aside, then we'll set it aside and deal with it later.
All right, Cease, I think you had the next
one. Cease, I think you're up.
Yeah, so Ross, last couple of weeks, you getting out of the house, have any contact with your staff? Personal contact?
I have not had any face-to-face contact. I was up in my office the other day. I saw a few staff members, from a distance. But what was really neat, last week we hosted a all-staff meeting on Zoom, and we had a tremendous guest speaker, Dr. Rick Rigsby. Gave us a great talk on just motivation and hope and clarity and really just being a leader. So I was able to kind of scroll through the screen and see a bunch of folks, on the meeting. And then we did a head coach's call 2 weeks ago, I guess. I speak to Jimbo, I don't know, maybe every other day or so. I spoke to Buzz Friday and Saturday. So there's just, constant dialogue out there and just you're trying to stay in touch and interact with folks the best you can. But seeing people in person, we've limited that, based on just trying to be safe.
Ross, have you learned to keep an eye on oil prices, first of all, and also would you mind addressing with the idea, the notion of what I think is a myth that A&M's athletic budget is dependent entirely on oil prices?
Well, I made sure I had the commodity app on my phone, I think the day that I started on July the 8th, right? You've got to pay attention to that living here in Texas. I don't know. We probably have to do a really in-depth survey to figure out exactly what the totals are of our donor base and season ticket holder base and, what industry that they're in. We have a lot of smart people and, obviously if you're in the oil business or not, you've gone through a wave of up and downs, especially in the oil business. And I think these folks know how to weather storms. This is obviously a little bit different one. We hope it's not long term, but I think these folks are smart. I think they diversify themselves. They come out of it. They get better. They sharpen their pencil. So it's hard to say exactly how much we're dependent on it. I'd really have to do an in-depth study on that. But we know it'll have an impact. We know that people, their livelihood, depending on what channel you're in the oil supply chain, you're going to be impacted. And how do we deal with them? That's the key. How do we deal with them? How do we have that compassion, that interaction, the flexibility? That's what we'll adapt to as much as anything, is working with them, as best we can.
Ross, real quick.
Hey, Ross.
Justin and the
Sure.
NFL draft. And I'm just curious, from your standpoint as AD, you don't have the same interaction. But if you have any personal, just finishing up a story on Justin, just was curious if you had any personal recollections or encounters with him, and what struck you about him as a person.
You could tell right away Justin had a different motor when I started watching practice last fall. And then we all know my previous institution was Ole Miss. And I went down to the field at the end of the third quarter at that game back in October. And that game was pretty important. We needed to win that game. And some of the players, were kind of teasing me on the trip and like, hey, we're going back to your old place. Who are you going to cheer for? And I'm like, guys, come on. I'm wearing maroon. And I remember the second half of that game, Justin seemed to kind of turn it up a notch. Like he was like at a different level, especially the second half of that game. And obviously we had to make some big stops, on defense because it was a tight game, a close game. And I just remember in the locker room just thanking him, hey, man, thank you. Thanks for getting this one. And he was like, hey, I know this was important to you, Mr. Ross. And just a great guy, great young man, always had a smile on his face, very intense, and a great player. So sealing that Ole Miss win on defense, that was important.
Hey, Ross, I wanted to see if and when they come out with a vaccine for the coronavirus or COVID-19, would you be on board with it being added to Texas University's vaccine list like they do polio and measles and all those others?
If that's what the university has as a priority, absolutely. We'd be all over that and help promote it and, just participate in whatever, platform there would be. So absolutely. I know there's a lot of people here at A&M in the research area, and, we've got pandemic experts here on campus, and it's pretty fascinating to see the leadership that's taking place, across our entire system, but especially here in College Station. So absolutely, we'd be fired up to participate, whatever that would look like.
Ross, if I could go back to this idea of who makes decisions for the sport, there's a lot of different moving parts with TV partners and athletic directors and coaches and administrators. Has anything that's happened, and I realize this is unprecedented, but has anything that's happened made you rethink the structure in terms of decision making for the sport?
Nothing at this point in time. I think that's where we're fortunate to have, Commissioner Sankey as our leader. And I think we have a great group of presidents, within the SEC right now that have national, perspectives or serve on, national committees. So I think we're fortunate, but no, nothing has caused, governance issues or anything like that at this stage. I think there's going to be a debrief and an aftermath analysis of everything that's taken place. And depending on what happens, right? I mean, is there going to be some uniform coordination, those type of things? But, right now there hasn't been, where we had to take a step back and really analyze the structure at this point. Everybody's just trying to get through this. We're trying to find the end game and the ending point. So nothing has caused that, at least from my perspective.
Hey, Ross. I like the new background, by the way.
Appreciate it. That's the old G. Raleigh White floor.
No, it looks great.
The baseline.
In the NFL, they've had, I think, 6 teams this offseason unveil new jerseys. And I know last time we talked, you mentioned that you guys, formulating the plan on how to release the football uniforms. Have you guys taken anything from how some of the NFL teams have done it as far as the marketing aspect of unveiling a new set of threads?
That hasn't hit my desk yet, but our creative team is talking weekly. Our external team is talking weekly about what that plan looks like. So I think it was the Patriots. Did the Patriots unveil their uniform yesterday? I think. So yeah, Chargers. So yeah, we'll look at how to be creative. Obviously, it'll be a virtual setting, but I know our folks are working on that.
Okay, guys. Anything in wrapping up today? It's really good questions. Always
Thanks,
appreciate the interest. Ross, anything in wrapping up from you?
No, appreciate you guys and gals. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ross.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.